Welcome to this week's RYA Club Zone video. This week I'm going to be speaking to the RYA Director of Racing, Ian Walker, about the latest changes to the easing of government restrictions in England and how this might impact clubs' ability to open changing rooms and showers, as well as we're going to talk about the latest thinking on mixed household sailing in dinghies, keelboats and yachts. Welcome along, Ian. Thanks for your time today. Can we start with the announcement about team sports, please, and what you think this means for sailing?
Hi, Gareth. Hi, everybody. Well, we sort of had an inkling that something was coming around sport. We'd talked about, we'd heard that cricket was going to open up, and clearly there's an appetite to get grassroots sport back in action. It's actually, without seeming to want to dodge the question, it's quite hard to say what it's got to do with us, because it specifically talks about outdoor team sports, and while sailing is obviously a team sport, double-handed or more crew on a keelboat, it's not a sort of what I would call a traditional team sport with two teams against each other, maybe with contact between those teams, maybe a ball that's thrown or kicked from one team to the other. So there still remain a lot of differences between what we do and outdoor team sports. And if I'm honest, I think this guidance was really aimed at those sports who aren't already back in action. And I would say that sailing has been back in action since the middle of May, when we were allowed to start free sailing. So I'm a little bit guarded about what it means, but I think it does recognise a shift in society. And I think what we're increasingly learning is that we're never going to find all the answers written in the exact wording of the government guidance, because they can't possibly deal with all the nuances of all the different sports. So what we really have to do is make sure that whatever activity we're doing and how we're approaching it sort of mirrors what is acceptable in wider society. And to my mind, once we've got groups of footballers kicking 9 bells out of each other on a football field, it then for me becomes more acceptable for sailors to be in closer proximity. So we are working with government to try and clarify exactly what it means. We're being very careful not to suddenly get dragged back into, to take a step backwards, because of course, as sailing at the moment, we're really well advanced and there's a lot more activity going on in sailing than most other sports.
Yeah, I mean, we're incredibly lucky, aren't we? It's great. We've been on the water for a good number of weeks now, or an awful lot of people have, and clubs have resumed activity. So yeah, we are in a good place. We are much more fortunate than many of the traditional ball sports, rugby, cricket, and so on. They're catching up with us now. So
yeah, well, I would of course add that it's easy to just keep an English hat on. Obviously, it's been much tougher for those in the home countries, although it appears that they're going to rapidly overtake the English in terms of the freedoms that they have, and I'll be very delighted when they all get back on the water, or even do come charging past us. And of course, within the sport, don't forget, it's been much easier for single-handers than it has been for crewed boats, whether that be double-handed dinghies or, of course, keelboats, small keelboats or yachts with increasing numbers.
So, Ian, one of the questions that we're getting from sailing clubs is, can they now advise their members that it's okay to restart sailing their double-handers, their keelboats, their yachts with mixed households? It's a difficult question, I know, but I'm gonna I've got to ask you.
Yeah, you're right. It is a difficult question, but I think it's a really important question. And I'm right in the heart of it. My daughter sails a 420, and I've been desperate for her to get out sailing. And I have asked it specifically of the government, and the answer I get is that the guidance is you should not meet in a group of more than 6 people, and you should maintain social distancing. So I guess that's the starting point. In a keelboat, it's hard to imagine you could have more than 6 people, and in any boat, you should be socially distanced. Now, it is possible to sail dinghies and keelboats maintaining 1 meter social distancing, but that might not be how we normally sail them, and it might in particular not be how we would normally race them. I would add that it's not the law. It's not enshrined in legislation. This is just guidance. But I think as a sport, we need to respect, the intent of the government guidance, and therefore I think that clubs and classes should not really be endorsing or encouraging activity that may break that guidance. So, for instance, hosting a double-handed event where there'll be lots of people from different households on the same boat in a race is probably not appropriate, and I choose my words carefully. I'm not saying you can't do it. It's not against the law, but it feels like it's against the intent of the government guidance currently. But if a pair decided to go sailing and they made an effort to socially distance in doing so, then surely there's nothing against that. So, different clubs have taken a different stance on this. Some clubs have just said it's for for single household and single hander only. I think my own view is it's not really the club's job to enforce it. I think this is an area of personal responsibility that people who sail need to make those judgments, and it's a complex judgment. I personally, with my daughter, she sails with her best friend. They live on the same road, so they're both young, they're both fit, but they could carry the virus and potentially transmit it to somebody else if they passed it on. But we don't have any at-risk members in the family. For me, that all comes into our judgment as to whether they can go sailing, along with how they might approach that sailing. Can they practice by making an effort to stay 1 meter apart? Well, I think they can. Could they race? I'm not so sure, because I think it would all get forgotten in the heat of battle. One thing I would say is that once we see other sports opening up, once we see grassroots football or hockey happening, or rugby even, it starts for me to become quite hard to accept that other sports are having closer contact with maybe fewer mitigations, and so therefore it becomes more acceptable. So I think that's where I personally at the moment. As I say, it's not enshrined in law. It's all about the intent of the government guidance. I think clubs will maybe decide their own appetite for risk and reputational risk and what they feel is appropriate for their members, and I would respect whatever decision they come to. But I would also hope that this is fast changing. We know in Scotland that you are now allowed to do contact sport at the age of under 18, so that's a change. We know the government are going to revise their rules at the end of July, or review the rules, in fact, in a week's time, and we'll hear rumours about that creeping out within the week. So I think, maybe a little more patience is required at the moment, but I would love to see some double-handed championships taking place in August. I really hope that things open up and we can really say to clubs with conviction and classes, look, it is appropriate. It's similar to other walks of life, and we think that you should crack on.
Yeah. I mean, on your final point, you're absolutely right. It's hellish fast-paced, this, isn't it? And changes, really quickly. And there's changes coming again. But yeah, we'll keep supporting clubs and advising them as best we can, and supporting them through this process. So thanks for tackling that one. Not an easy one. So.
It's changed so fast, Gareth, that I'm even checking my inbox as I'm speaking to you and make sure there's nothing new coming.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a bit of a challenge. Anyway, on to the next thing. Yeah, absolutely. So I know from talking to you that you're working with the Department for Culture, Media and Sport. What's the process there, Ian? What can you tell us about that?
Well, I've worked with colleagues at the RYA. We worked most of the weekend actually putting together a submission which went in. I've had some initial feedback, but how can I put this politely? I'm not expecting really exact, detailed answers to some of the questions we've posed. I've been very so the Return to Outdoor Sport framework, which is really aimed at those sports who aren't already back in action, that has asked those national governing bodies to write an action plan for how their sport might return to action, what mitigation would be in place, and how the national governing body would enforce those measures. Now, of course, that is not an area we want to go to. We are already back in action. We don't want to create tons and tons of rules. And to my mind, the key issues we really need more clarity on from government are around, what mitigation is appropriate or necessary in order for us to really know that double-handed or multi-crewed or multi-household crewing, shall we call it, is permissible. And also, I've sought a little bit more guidance as regards events, because the government really aren't specific as to what might be appropriate. We at the RYA have endorsed racing now for a while. I think it is now appropriate to look at doing bigger events, but is that just local open meetings? Is it regional championships? Or can classes, single-handed classes, is it appropriate to run major national championships right now? All of which obviously would be on condition that the venues are able to be COVID compliant and abide by all the health and safety and, of course, the government COVID regulation particularly around gatherings.
Good. So, I mean, the other change that's coming in is around the easing of restrictions around changing facilities, and it's worth kind of reinforcing that these have not come into effect yet. That easing is due to start from the 25th of July. I went through all the guidance as I know you've done as well, and I found it pretty difficult to find the exact wording on the DCMS website, but it is there. It's in section 6.4 if anyone listening is keen to do their own research. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that? It's in there, but it's
I'm probably the worst person to ask out. I'm probably I can count the number of times I go in a changing room on one hand anyway, but maybe that's because I live near the sailing club. But look, I think that it's really clear in the government guidance that they are perceived to be a risky environment. Therefore, you should only use changing rooms when you need to. And I can understand that there are people who will feel the need to. And I'm particularly thinking maybe as well around, parasailing perhaps, where, you need some of the facilities that may exist in a changing room that don't exist outdoors. I recognise that, different boats demand different clothing, different weather exists in different, at different times in different parts of the country. So I think the message is don't use them unless you have to. I would say that a lot of sailing activity has gone on in the last month or two without changing rooms. It is really important that we remain inclusive to all of our members, and therefore clubs now should feel able to open their changing room. But with that will come some extra responsibility around obviously social distancing, which is even more important in that environment than outside, but also around cleaning, and that could also involve extra costs for changing for sailing clubs in their changing facilities as well. So I would say, look, only use them where essential, but clubs should feel able to do so if that need exists. You're probably better placed than myself, Gareth.
No, I've just been kind of skim reading through the guidance again as we've been chatting, and you're exactly right. The DCMS guidance specifically says it's about using changing rooms and showers when it's essential. So there are plenty of. That's the first question really. Do I even need to use the changing rooms and showers, or does the club need to open them? We are able to. Some people will really benefit from that. It will help them get back on the water, and that's great. But there's an awful lot of us that may not need to yet.
Maybe once the sailing club bar and restaurants open, we're gonna wish people had a shower after sailing. So maybe our attitude will change a bit then.
Yeah, that's it. Especially after a hot race and everyone's.
There's nothing wrong with a hose pipe shower.
Yeah, we've done plenty of that. I mean, the government's suggesting plenty of things, really sensible suggestions about how clubs, not just sailing clubs, providers of grassroots sports facilities can make the place safer. And it's about making sure that there's regular cleaning, more thorough cleaning, that there's cleaning provisions available so people can actually clean up after themselves, and we restrict the number of people that are using the showers and the changing rooms. Lots of really good common sense things, and they're all captured in the RYA club guidance to restarting activity. So it's all, you know, as always, it's worth having another look at those and checking those out. They're nicely captured, so you can have a read of those and see what's there. But look, thanks for your time, Ian. Really appreciate you chatting to us. Is there anything you want to add before we say goodbye?
I think it's just to reiterate that this isn't simple. This is a really complicated situation. There's regional variations. Guidance is changing all the time. But my own personal reflection is that we need to make sure that whatever we do, it's in tune with wider society. And as wider society is easing up their restrictions, then we can do so too. And if we do that, we'll avoid any reputational risk, any criticism of the sport, any criticism of our clubs, but we, the RYA, of course, want to see the sport and the activity increase and opened up as much as possible, whilst maintaining a minimum risk of infection. So just to thank everybody for all the care they're taking, and I have to say, the volunteers on the clubs who've had to painstakingly go through all this godforsaken guidance and had to try and advise their members. There's been some really outstanding work done by those volunteer committees, so well done to them. And as always, the RYA, we're here to try and support you in that, so don't hesitate to contact us if we can help you.
Yeah, absolutely. Here, really well said. And if you do have any questions, please drop us an email to sport.development@rya.org.uk, and we'll do our utmost to answer your question or find somebody that can. So don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and our podcast as well. And really importantly, stay safe and look after one another. Thanks very much, everyone.